Well, Eric, let's dive into the world of weather and talk about all that's happening here. We'll do a long-range forecast in a second, but first, couldn't ask for better weather for a farm show.
Oh no, this is perfect. This is probably the nicest weather I've ever seen for Husker harvest days.
Got a light breeze at about mid-70s. That's pretty darn good,
usually
isn't
it's either 55 or 95 out here.
Yeah, I remember last year, it felt like a furnace with the wind blowing as hot as it got. Let's talk about, as we look to the next week in terms of weather on the temperature front, of course, a lot of combines are starting to roll across the field. What can we expect temperature-wise?
Temperature-wise, I think we should be looking at fairly seasonal conditions for about the next week to 10 days. Maybe a bit cooler as we head toward the end of next week and into the early part of the week after that. There is a potential for wise precipitation later this next week. A little bit uncertain in terms of models, but things are shaping up where we are starting to maybe head into a little bit of a stormier pattern as we get toward the end of the month here.
On the weather front, you never like me to try to pinpoint you down and to make you commit to something, but when you say widespread, we're talking across the state of Nebraska. Any idea on precipitation amounts that we might be able to see with that system?
At this point, amounts are probably a little harder to say, but some of the model projections that I've seen so far for about that 7 to 10 day would actually say that most of the eastern 2/3 of the state could get an inch and a half of rain.
So we look at the past few weeks, man, we had some hot days in there. You and I talked about that in some of the previous broadcasts, but is it safe to say the hot weather is behind us at this point in the fall?
Well, that might depend on what you define as hot. If by hot you mean like mid-90s to 100, I'm pretty sure I think we're done with that for the year. Okay. We can't rule out some more days, the upper 80s, low 90s for anywhere in the state, but I feel pretty confident we're done with the significant amount of heat. We probably are going to see temperatures stay fairly seasonal to maybe slightly below seasonal at times as we head toward the end of the month and into October.
We do begin, as harvest is underway, we begin to get some concerns about frost. Any thoughts on that? If we perhaps could see an early frost this year, is that one of those tough things to predict?
Frost is hard to predict just because, sometimes frost can vary a lot by elevation and just low-lying areas. I feel pretty confident saying that I don't see any frost on the horizon in the next week. But, of course, especially as you get to the western part of the state, late September, there's always that chance of frost after you get a good cold front. And it does look like we are going to start getting some stronger troughing into the central U.S. as we head toward the end of the month. Out ahead of that, we'll probably see some storms. And behind that, I think we will have to start watching out for some scattered frost, particularly in north central and western Nebraska, and in particular at higher elevations.
Okay. Well, as we look back on this past growing season, we came into it seems like almost across the entire state of Nebraska, we're in drought conditions, particularly in the west and more central areas. We made a dent in that, but large drought remains in portions of eastern to central Nebraska. I guess as you look toward the fall, any relief ahead on that front, or is that something we might have to wait till next spring to be thinking about?
Well, the CPC's official forecast right now is basically persistence of drought. And their last outlook, which was released earlier this month, basically showed that there was going to be some redevelopment of drought in parts of the western Corn Belt and central Great Plains where you don't currently have it. My thought is I think we will start seeing a little bit more relief in parts of the state as we head into October. But again, there is drought, particularly in parts of south central, and northeastern Nebraska, still really, really bad. So we got a long way to go before we really clear a drought in those areas.
Seems like the Farmer's Almanac, they always want to predict what kind of winter we're going to have. Any key indicators, I guess, as we look out to the winter of what hard winter, soft winter, that greatly depends on where you live in the state of Nebraska, doesn't it?
If it is, we are definitely in an El Nino, and I think we're going to start seeing more impacts to our weather from El Nino as we head into October and November. Traditionally, El Nino winters here are generally a little bit milder. They can be wetter, particularly in the southern part of Nebraska and eastern part of Nebraska, which this year that would be great if we could get some decent moisture. Now, of course, if that falls after the soils are frozen, then that's not always worthwhile. But my forecast right now is for it to be generally about seasonal to mild and wetter than we've been probably in the last 2 or 3 winters, with more snowfall and probably more overcast days than we've probably had in a few years.
All right, we'll keep a close eye on all of it. Plus, we'll have you on the weekly show to discuss what you're seeing week to week. That
Absolutely.
is Nebraska Extension's Eric Hunt.